topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Hello and welcome to the new episode of Mindfulness in Action. My name is Dalida Turkovic, and today I have a guest. I will be honest, it's the first guest I actually have never met before. This is the first time. Prior to this episode, it's been all people. I either had a professional or personal connection. I know them, I know their background. But for this specific guest, I reached out because the topic is something that I think it's a topic that is important at any time. Right now, there are certain social events that I think it's particularly important to address, and let's see where we go with that. So without further ado, my guest is Bari Tessler. And I'm just going to say briefly, because I think that if I start saying what she has done, it's probably going to take me 50 minutes. But she's the author of 2 books, The Art of Money, A Life-Changing Guide to Financial Happiness, and The Art of Money Workbook. And she has been featured on Oprah, Inc.com, US News and World Report, Reuters Money, Fiscal Times, and the list goes on. I invite you to check more on her website, baritessler.com. But now I would like you to meet her live, and welcome to the studio, Mindfulness in Action. Bari, thank you so much. I know you're on sabbatical and you're just doing chosen moments when you show up. So tell us a little bit on the moment of pause that you are at right now.
Yes, I love
maybe start from there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I loved how you said that I'm choosing moments to show up. So yes, I'm on a year-long sabbatical. I'm 9 months in. The sabbatical is something that was calling to me after I spent my 20s in graduate school to train to be a somatic psychotherapist, and then started my work and ran my business and facilitated my work for 25 years. And at the end of those 25 years, I started getting the calling I needed a break for so many reasons. A few was just the time in my life. I just turned 57 this year. I'm on the other side of menopause. I'm an older mom, and my son was entering his senior year of high school and just graduated a couple of weeks ago. I wanted to be present as I could be for him, for myself, for my family. I also have a dog and 3 cats, and the sabbatical was just a deep, deep calling. A year or 2 before, I had to have many conversations with my husband. We've been together 25 years, make this decision together. I can be very intense when I want something, but this was more of a deep knowing. I need a break. I really, really need a long pause. And so I could have made the decision on my own, and there have been moments where I've pulled that card. He calls it the freight train card, where I just really want something, know something needs to happen, and I pull that card. But I with this one, I dropped seeds for many, many, many months until we took a long walk in the woods in the high mountains, and he saw clearly this needs to happen now. And so we made the decision that if I was going to take this sabbatical, that he needed to, increase his revenue, grow his business? Was he ready to do that? Was our family ready to do that? Because we've always been not 50-50 exactly in our financials, but we like to feel 50-50 in our contributions to our family. And so sometimes it's 60-40. One year, my side was 75% bringing in the income. It switches depending on what's going on. So we had to make a decision together and say, are you ready to grow your side? He said he was, even though it was scary and, things came up for him. And so anyway, that's a little bit about, something about I was approaching 57, all those things. I needed a big break after 25 years. I felt I had done a big contribution of my time and work and service, and needed a pause to see what else is on the horizon for me on all the levels.
Thank you for sharing that. And it's such an important part of mindfulness practice. And when I was searching for the topic, I'll now share basically a little bit more also about my curiosity, the art of pausing. As mindfulness practitioners, I'm a mindfulness educator. I am in some communities where we are at the moment really identifying the crossroad of mindfulness and where it was pre-COVID, then how we moved online during COVID, and it was this new promised career in a way. And now it's coming into a standstill. And I know because I'm part of many dialogues, and a lot of mindfulness practitioners are actually struggling with making money. It somehow seems that just the connection between these two, mindfulness and money, is a little bit off. And so I put these two words on search, and your name came up. And what you're describing for your personal life is relational mindfulness. How does a family manage money and all of it, which is beautiful. Thank you for modeling that. And sabbatical is just completely saying we need to pause, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, I know that your core philosophy and ethos is to manage the emotional side and somatic side related to money. And I know so many people, including myself, being overwhelmed with anxiety, financial crisis, business that is not coming back up. And it's a little bit of, what do I do? How do I do? Avoiding money or thinking about it. Could you share a little bit, how did you come into connecting mindfulness and money so skillfully? and what is that like? Yeah.
What is it like? What does it look like? There's so much there. Okay. So I stepped into somatic psychotherapy from a place of, I grew up as a dancer, and there was a TV show, Solid Gold Dancers, and I was that was my first thing I wanted to be. I'm going to be a solid gold dancer. The second thing was I want to be a businesswoman. So at age 12, I had to write a report of what I was going to be when I grew up, and my dad was in business. And so we're similar, we're also, he was very intense. And so I had to, how are we similar? What feels healthy about that? What does not feel healthy about that? Where am I different? Where do I want to be different? There's a lot of differentiating myself from my father. We looked a lot alike. There was a lot, but second thing was a businesswoman. So that was so either a dancer, businesswoman at 12. And then at 16, I asked my parents if I could go see a therapist. So I started being very interested in psychotherapy, understanding myself on a deeper level. And so I feel at some point, I studied history in my undergrad, and then I still didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I went and traveled, and I then decided, I thought I made up dance movement therapy and somatic psychology. and realized at some point I didn't make up anything. There's a whole field, and there's graduate programs in dance movement therapy and somatic psychology. And I took myself to that program at the age of 24. So I feel it's an integration of the dancer in me, the businesswoman, and the psychotherapy work, and integrated all of them into, but I found this program because I needed somatic tools. I needed to remember how to listen to my body. You know, you think if you grow up as a dancer, you know how to listen to your body, but just like any other woman in Western culture, or maybe other cultures as well, I was being taught to ignore my body's signals and messages. And so I wanted to learn them. I felt that was essential training for my 20s to help get me through my trainings. So I took myself to graduate school at the age of 24, and I spent all my 20s steeped in learning how to listen to my body, my intuition, my emotions, my messages, notice when I was getting overwhelmed, what to do with that. You know, we didn't call it fight, flight, freeze, fawn, trauma responses or stress responses. This was the 90s. So this Peter Levine's first book came out in 1998 as I was graduating, you know. But we did very similar work. It just wasn't with that language. And but I spent my 20s, my topics were intimacy, sexuality, body, grief, and death. Those were the topics that I was steeped in, that I was living, that I was studying. And when I graduated, you know, after all of the work that we did, the classroom work, the internships, the 150-page thesis, where I gathered a group of young women and used authentic movement and self-created ritual to help them understand themselves as young women moving into more adulthood, and created, you know, a whole training around that. And then when I walked across the stage and my student loan came due, it was a moment of, how am I going to pay back my student loan, making $11 an hour in all of the, you know, my internships, or even the jobs that I was looking at, or the jobs that I was working in the social work field, were $11 an hour with a master's degree. And how was I going to pay back my student loans? And then second, I turned back to look at my training, and I just could not believe that we did not talk about money at all in my entire graduate psychotherapy training. And it was like flashing lights of, how did this happen? How did we get through this training? And I don't even understand my own money emotions or my own money story, or how am I going to work with couples when they're fighting about money on the surface, and the topic's money, and they have very different approaches and money styles, let alone how do I do bookkeeping, and how do I run my own private practice? And there were so many missing pieces that I really thought for a moment, oh, I'll just go traveling the world and ignore this. And, you know, I'll just ignore it. I like to give myself options, and that was one of them. Or, you know, also as therapists, we were taught to, you know, not only, you know, ignore money, but not talk about it. You're not supposed to want money or strive for money. You're supposed to just do your good work and do your service, and somehow it's going to all work out. And that was another option, you know, just go live on an ashram somewhere and go off the grid and create a different type of lifestyle. But I pretty quickly realized, I'm not going to ignore this. I'm not going to run away. I'm going to face it like every other big topic in my life, that at first is very scary, and then I'm going to face it. And so my first stop in one of the programs that I was working at, one moment the director asked me if I wanted to learn bookkeeping, Quicken and Excel. These are different tracking programs, bookkeeping programs. He was going to teach me how to use them so I could do the books for the program, the social work program I was working for. And I kept a poker face. You know, I was throwing away my own bank statements at the time, and I just pretended that what he was asking me, inviting me to do was a totally normal thing for him to ask me. And I had this intuition, I had this voice say yes. And I think part of it was that I was working in the milieu 40 hours a week with clients, and it was a lot for me. And I wanted some 5 hours in a back room, quiet and learning, but I didn't think I could learn it. I did not think I can learn bookkeeping. I wasn't great at math growing up. But we went into this back room. He taught me these bookkeeping systems, and my mind was blown in a wonderful way. I love learning these bookkeeping systems. I started doing my own bookkeeping, and I wound up having this little transition after graduate school and working in all of these mental health social work programs and hospice for years. I wound up doing bookkeeping for a little transition for other therapists and coaches and artists. And I always say that I feel I learned more about people's relationship to money, their spending patterns, their income and revenue patterns, their values of how they were spending or saving or giving or not doing some of that, family dynamics. I would be welcomed into someone's business. I learned so much during that time period. They had no idea I had a master's in psychology. They didn't care. They just wanted to have nothing to do with their bookkeeping and threw their books at me. And I learned so much during those years when I was 28 to 32 years old. And then it was at 32 when I started realizing that it was time to integrate all of my training as a psychotherapist and all of those mindfulness practices and all of the practices of listening to my body and somatic tools with all of this money management. It was something I needed, as I said. It was something I was looking for. It was something that even I can look around and see people from all different backgrounds and all different economic classes and all different lineages. And we all had strengths around money, and we all had challenges around money, and we all had missing pieces in our education. So for me, there was a moment where I realized I need to integrate emotional literacy and financial literacy. And I had a mentor that she invited me to do her books, her bookkeeping. And then we had these really deep and wide spiritual conversations. And she invited me to give a talk on my method to a group of 20 women. And I said, what method? What are you talking about? But I said, again, just say yes. And I went on a long walk in the woods one day. I was living in California at the time. I now live in Colorado. And I just started asking questions. How do I what is my method? What is my method here? And how, at the time I was saying how to help people have a conscious relationship to money, but I could have said how to help my community, myself included, how to have a mindful relationship to money. What are the phases? What are the steps? What's the framework? How to help people have a mindful, creative, savvy, on and on and on, add your adjectives, relationship to money. And I was getting all these ideas, and I came running home, and I was living with my boyfriend, who's now my husband, in this tiny little 350 square foot cabin in the redwoods. And he saw something was going on, and he threw up big white paper in our little cabin on the walls. And we created the first 3 phases of my method. Now I call it money healing, money practices, money maps. But at the time it was financial therapy, values-based bookkeeping, and life vision planning. And he came up with the term financial therapy. And I remember the internet was brand new. This was 2001. I mean, not brand new, but it was still very, very, very new. And I went up and I said, who's using this term? And there was one other woman in Canada. And I just realized there was something there. And I went and gave my first talk on my financial therapy method. And I remember being very nervous and sweating and having to really check in with my body during that entire talk, check in with my body, check in with the 20 women in the room, check in with my body, check in with them. And I was starting the practice of that oscillation practice that I was taught in graduate school of checking in with yourself, oscillating to the space and who's in the room and what's happening. And I was able to give the talk. And from there, I decided to teach my very first class, my first 6-week class in my living room. Now I was living in an apple orchard, still, with my cats and my husband. And I'll complete this story with, I sent out invitations, I think paper invitations to people I'd been meeting at the health food store, meeting in the community. I had put up little flyers all around town. I'm teaching my first 6-week class in my living room, on my financial therapy method. I don't even know what the language was at that time. It might have been mindful bookkeeping. It might have, my business at the time, my first name was Conscious Bookkeeping, before it evolved. And the very first evening, we're sitting in a circle in chairs in my living room, and I'm inviting people to start talking about some of their memories of their relationship to money, or their mom's relationship to money, or their grandparents' relationship to money, or their siblings' relationship to money, and how their role was different or the same, or were they a spender or a saver from an early age? And I was asking these questions and inviting everyone to start talking about their money story, and everyone just shut down. Everyone's eyes started glazing over, just deer in a headlight, shutting down. And I realized pretty quickly, I'm leaving out my 10 years of somatic training here. I'm completely forgetting to stop and pause and to invite them to check into their bodies, and what I call a body check-in, and to just notice what's happening on a physical level, or what are the sensations in our bodies in this moment, or what's the emotion, or where is our breath in our body? Is it up in our throat? Is it down in our chest? Is it shallow? Is it deep? And that very first night, I realized I was forgetting this very essential first step. And so the very next week, I invited everyone to do a body check-in. And then we shared what we were all noticing in our bodies. And it was a completely different entranceway into talking about our money stories, our money memories, our family of origin, parents, grandparents, and so on. And so for me, the somatic training is the foundation of everything. It's the foundation of my work. It's the foundation of my business. It's the foundation of my parenting. And it's inviting in a body check-in, and everyone has a different version of meditation or how they check in. And sometimes the body check-in could be 30 seconds. It could be 5 minutes. And it's really just inviting yourself. It could be on a physical level. What do you notice? Are your legs crossed? Are they open? Are your shoulders up? Are they down? Or what's the emotion right now? Oh, I'm feeling shame or anger or sadness or anxiety. Where do you notice it in your body? And I always like to end a body check-in with, what is one little adjustment that you can make right now to help you feel more okay, calm, whatever word, add in any adjective. There's no right or wrong with any of it. And what is one little adjustment to help me feel more okay or calm in this moment? And it could be, I notice my shoulders are up to my ears. I'm just going to see if I can lower them down a bit. Or I'm noticing my jaw is really tight. I'm going to see if I can loosen it a little bit. Or I'm noticing my breath is up. I'm going to see if I can get my breath a little down. So sometimes I'll ask myself that a few times at the end of a body check-in. What is one little adjustment that I can make now to help me feel more okay or more present? Okay. Now I'm going to ask myself that again. What is one little adjustment? And in Peter Levine's world, it's called resourcing. But back again in the 90s, before, in my training, we didn't have that language. So that's a little bit of a body check-in that I invite people to do. In my classes when I was teaching, I would always start with a body check-in, end with a body check-in. I invite people to do it in day-to-day life, before they're going to have a money conversation as prep. Or in the heat of the moment, they're realizing I'm fighting and yelling with my partner right now, or my kids or my parents around money, or, and just stop and pause, do a body check-in. So you can do it before you're going to have a money conversation or make a big money decision as prep. You can see if you can remember it in the heat of the moment as you're having all of these money emotions come up. Or you're suddenly online shopping in the middle of the night and you can pause and go body check in. What's going on? Am I hungry? Am I tired? Am I sad? Do I need to put this tab over to the side and come back to it 24 hours later? Do I really need another bathing suit? No, I don't, or after as a debriefing, what just happened? How did that money decision go? How did that money conversation go? What would I do different now? How am I feeling? What is one way that I can resource myself or find a way to feel more okayness in my body right now? Oh, wow, I really need to go get a snack, or I really need to go take a walk, or I'm going to hum. I'm going to do some humming right now because that helps coming down. We all have different resources or ways that we use in so many other areas of our lives that we don't think, hey, we can bring to our relationship to money too. So at some point, I'll pause after here because I'm saying a lot, but I realized I don't have a relationship to money. I have a relationship with so many other things. And I have all these great practices and modalities that I bring to all areas of my life, but I've definitely delegated money to a corner, a closet, it's something totally separate. And so for me in my 20s, I realized the only way I'm going to enter into relationship to money is if I can bring the creativity or the ritual or the deeper meaning and all these other practices that I do in my life. I need to bring it to my relationship to money as well. It's not separate. It's not separate. So I'm going to pause there because there's so much more, but I'm going to pause there.
Yes. And it's really something sang for me, this not separate. It's so important. Like as I was listening and following your journey, it just feels so relatable in any time, at any time, in any context. I'm also realizing you're mentioning these words from Peter Levine. It didn't exist until you just finished your studies. There's so many things that didn't exist then, and we have them now.
Yes.
Like AI, the context of people losing jobs, that the context of, now, like I'm 56, and I just read an article recently. The most difficult thing for women past 50 is to find the job. Nobody wants women after 50. And so these realities that are currently present, that are slightly different to how it was in 20th century, right? So that's one context. And then now Bitcoin, I don't think Bitcoin was there. It's like, so what is money? It's like, so there's that whole other thing. So I'm not separate from money, but what is money? What am I not separate from?
So these are great questions. Okay. I think even at the beginning, I would say, okay, you define what money is to you, because yes, I'm not an economist. I'm not a financial planner. I'm not doing investments for you or selling you insurance. I collaborate with all of those folks. Like we need a team of financial planners to help us with long-term planning. We need a team of accountants or financial coaches. Financial coaches are on our support team. They're more sitting down with you and looking at your numbers and helping you learn a bookkeeping system and what phase of life are you in now, and what are your priorities and values now, and how do they align with the income you have now, right? They sit down with you. And I love financial coaches, but as a financial therapist, I've always done a little bit of that planning, and that's part of my 3 phases. But I'm more helping people understand their money psychology, meaning that if 90% of our money decisions are based on our emotions, then I really need to help folks understand what those emotions are. But we can define money from, it's just a value that we exchange. I don't even know if I remember what the definition is from an econ. But so for me, it's always been, what is money? That's one of the set of journaling questions that I ask people, and for everyone, it's different. It's the root of all evil. It's greed. Or it's just a form of energy, or it's whatever we want to make it to be. But the reality is, in capitalist societies, and right, unless we're going to go off the grid and live on a farm somewhere, an ashram or somewhere where everyone's sharing resources, then most of us are putting ourselves, our gifts, our service out into the world and creating a business and bringing it to the marketplace. And how do we value that? And how do we separate our value and worth from the numbers in our bank account? And at the same time, we need to charge for our services. And let me back up for a moment and just say, when I was figuring out my work in the world, the internet did not exist, right? So we don't know what's coming, AI in the last so many years. So I just knew that at the time, I didn't want a traditional private practice where I would see 10 clients a day, let's say. But I didn't know what I was going to create, and that was terrifying for me. And so I just had to follow the breadcrumbs, or the chocolate crumbs, as I say, and just follow them, as you heard some of my story. And, leading the small groups, live, local in one area, led me from 10-person groups to 20-person to 50 people live. And then people outside of California just started calling me and saying, hey, I want to take your class. And so I started creating teleclasses, with little handouts that I would email, and then eventually got online, right, with all the teaching platforms, and could teach people all over the world. But I didn't know that at the beginning. And so I'm saying that is one piece. The second piece is that all businesses go up and down. In life and in money, we are going to have ebbs and flows. We're going to have growth years. We're going to have rest years. We're going to have really challenging years. That's my experience in life and with money as well. Yes, there are some people who grow every year, but that's not been my experience. And so that's why one of my teachings has been, how do we create a life and business based on time, money, energy, family, and health? So this is one of my equations. After 25 years, I have so many frameworks and equations, but one is, what phase of life are we in? How much energy do we have? Are we, did we have a new baby? We need to rest. Are we in menopause? We need to rest. There's what phase of life? Where's our health at? What is our family constellation? Is it me and my cats? Is it me and a husband and, a teenager? And so it's always changing. Where's our income at this time? Is it up? Is it down? Is it a growth year? So that's one equation. And sometimes we have control of our growth and sometimes we don't, right? Meaning there were 10 years where I had a year-long program and about 500 students each year. That was fabulous. That was the heyday of online courses. It changed, right? They stopped working as well. They still work, but we're in a different phase. So we have to get creative. It's scary. We have to pivot. I can tell so many stories of pivoting, and and maybe I still might do a podcast series on how women have had to pivot in their businesses, and some inspiring stories and challenges. For one example, a close friend and colleague had a photography business for years. It was going great. Then the pandemic, she couldn't go anywhere. She couldn't travel. She couldn't. So she shifted to an online teaching called Visibility Medicine. Excuse me. I do that sometimes. I switch up words. Visibility medicine, because we have a hard time being visible. We want to. And so she moved to that, and she created a whole business that has done really well, right? And now it's in a different phase. Or women's businesses or work in the world after 50. I know there are groups all over the world of women post 50, post 60 that are starting new careers and doing things in a new way, because either they don't want to work in the corporate world anymore, or the corporate world's not having them. So for me, it's business, and even my relationship to money has always been a psycho-spiritual journey and practice and challenge at different life phases. So we do sometimes go through phases where we need to pivot and find other creative ways to bring our work into the world. And, I'll give one more little framework here, is that along with that equation, and it's never like, in my 30s, I had so much time. So I worked all the time because I just had so much time and energy. And then when I had my son, I needed to be in recovery. So things changed. So I'm always asking different questions at different moments in life and in my business. So this goes back to not every year is a growth year. So what new set of questions can you bring in? And I'll tell a few short stories. So when I was in 10 years of growth with my online business, my online course, the Art of Money. It was the Art of Money, the money school, right? As I was saying, I had 500 students. At some point though, actually, let me back up. That came after. There was a moment where at 38, I decided, changed my mind. I wasn't going to have kids. It really surprised me. I woke up one day, and the only next step on my path was to have a son. His name was going to be Noah. I saw it so clearly. And I had to drop seeds again to my husband. We were no kids. It took almost a year for us to go to therapy, for him to finally do his own work around parenting. And he had a very challenging father and realized he would be a different parent. And he came to a yes, and we decided to try to have a child. And I'm very grateful that all worked out. And my son's now 17, as I mentioned. But when I had him, I had a complication in my labor that I needed a rest and recovery period. And in that period, I had been running, I had a business partner, I had 2 assistants, we had an umbrella of bookkeepers and financial coaches under our umbrella. We had a great business model. It was working. And then all of a sudden I had a beautiful conception and pregnancy, and then such a challenging labor. And so all of a sudden I had to rest and be in recovery. And so my questions were, do I keep going the way my business has always been? Or do I take a pause on my business? Here I am again, years later, right? 17 years later. And so the questions I had to ask were, how can I put my work out in the world while I'm sleep deprived? And so what can I do right now? What can I give in the world that is going to allow me to do it while I'm sleep deprived? That's going to make the most money, that I enjoy the most. At the time, it was teaching groups of 50 people. So I did that. So that was what I did then. But I let go of my business partner and my team, and I went back to a one-woman show. And I just had to, for many, many months, say, I'm in a transition. Our income went way down during the next 2 years. And we had to, my dog just came in here, and we had to work with that and live within that. And I had to keep doing a lot of self-talk of we're in a transition. We're in a transition. We will get through this. We will get through this time. We will be in a growth year again. We will make more income again. So we had to be really, really simple with our income at the time. And my husband was growing a new business at the time. Then we start sleeping when my son's 2.5. And I'm like, I have energy. I'm sleeping. He's sleeping. We're ready to go again. And that's when I came up with the idea for the year-long program that works so well for the next 10 years. But the set of questions I asked were very different than when I first had my son, which were, I'm sleep deprived. What can I do on 10 hours a week? I said, what can I do in 10 hours a week that I can make the most money, that I will enjoy, that I can do while I'm in recovery in 10 hours? The questions now were, I have more time and energy. How can I give to my community in a much bigger way? How can I be more generous with my content than ever? How can I even reduce my program price a bit and hope that I'll get a lot more people? I didn't know if it was going to work. And I wound up lowering the price. And in the online world, it's raise your prices, private sessions, yes, raise your prices. But with groups, we can lower the price point a bit. And I wound up creating a year-long program and framework. And I had no idea how it was going to go because I was struggling at the time to get 50 people in my 6-month programs. I would get 40, 42, which still was good. But, I needed 50 to meet my goals and numbers. And I remember we were in a huge dip. It was a December. I thought, wow, do we have to maybe go move in with my in-laws for a period of time? My son was 2.5. We opened up the year-long program and we wound up getting 300 and so people signing up in that January, which shifted everything. And so it was a big pivot by asking a different set of questions. What phase of life? What's going on with time and energy? What's going on with family constellation? And then how can I offer my work in a different way than I've ever offered it before? Now, I had a community already. I had a big email list, but I didn't know. And because I lowered the price point and made it more accessible, more people joined, which increased my revenue. And so, I'm just giving some examples of we're all going to go through ups and downs and ebbs and flows in life and work and our businesses. And so, and this is one more point. Some years, the internal changes are what's propelling us to make, meaning like having a baby and then needing recovery. I needed to change everything in my business. Sometimes it's a pandemic, or everything's costing more, or things aren't working. There's external factors that make us go through a dip, and it's painful, it's challenging, it's tough. And so how do we find the inner resources? How do we have moments of crying? How do we have moments of, we go to a friend group, we go to a support group, we get people, we're in some kind of support business groups where we're supporting each other to come up with pivots and new creative ideas based on what's happening internally, externally, where we have to make changes. And this is part of running a business for many, many, many years. This is all part of it.
Yeah. Yes, it's a trajectory of all these moments, and when you said, and then she just started making yourself visible, right? Or the program.
Yes.
But I appreciate so much that you are saying it's not just saying, oh, this is not working, and I'll just do this, and then everything happens. There's such a complexity in that, and having inner resources, but also awareness of external resources, the way your family functioned and how you were sticking together and staying together at difficult times and supporting each other. I mean, that's Sangha in action, really, when you really think about it. So I really, really appreciate everything you shared and your wisdom about including money. What I'm taking out of what you shared is saying, the question for me that is popping up is, how can I make money as part of my spiritual quest?
Love it. And we all have different questions at different points in different life phases, and it's going to change. But I remember when that was my main question, was how can I have more of a relationship with money, and what do I want it to look and feel like, and how do I make it more of a spiritual feel and look? What does that mean to me? So, so when you sit down to pay bills, when you sit down to envision a new way of offering your services, when you sit down, for me, I call that a money date, but I light my candles. I've been holding a rock this whole time. I get out my rocks, I get out my dark chocolate, I set up the space so that because this is a scary, challenging area of life that brings up all these different set of emotions. And so how do I set up my space even so it feels it's imbued with deeper meaning or more of a spirituality? Or so even my money dates, that's one of my tools or practices that I teach. There's so many. So please go to my books or my blog posts or my podcast to get more of this. How do you infuse it with spirituality, and what does that mean to you? And in even like the practical moments of, I'm going to call a new accountant, or I'm going to pay some bills, or I'm going to go learn a new bookkeeping system, or all the bookkeeping things. My husband, we switch of who's doing the bookkeeping. He'll only do the bookkeeping if he can pretend or make it feel like it's a meditation practice for him. So when he sits down, he sits on his cushion, and tracks everything. Or I've had people who were able to do a meditation practice, a daily hour meditation practice for years and years, but a money date, no way, until they started saying, I'm going to open 5 minutes in my 60-minute meditation practice, and I'm going to sit down and say, hello, money. What is one part of our relationship that needs some attention right now? One thing, 5 minutes of just giving it some attention, and creating a practice. So on a daily basis, you're saying, hello, money. I'm going to invite you in. What do you need right now? What does it need? Do I need to check in and do a body check-in and check in with my emotions? Okay, great. Okay, what's going on here? What resourcing do I need? What are some to-dos that I need to add to my money to-do list? What are a few things? So if you're someone, as you mentioned at the beginning, who's just completely ignoring this area of life, and, just starting a little list of what are some to-dos, and then starting to craft a money date where you can light your candles, get out your lavender oil. Some people are like, this is so out there, but this is called mindfulness in action. For me, that's mindfulness in action, is pausing and creating a space that feels different for me, and getting out the chocolate and the lavender oil and doing all the things to try to resource and calm me down, and just saying like, hey, money, what are a few things that need my attention? And giving this area of life, which I call like a garden of life, some watering and some attention, and not overwatering, but most of us underwater. Yeah.
Yes. I'm just sensing this spaciousness that is created with this rich sharing and the experience of, a lot of common humanity that you're bringing into this moment. And one thing that I'm aware of is that I'm sensing peace inside of me, and that's a great great sign for me that I'm ready. When I'm peaceful about something, I'm ready for the relationship. And then we go and see whatever that brings. We have just a little bit under one. Well, we have 15 seconds before our time is up. But Bari, anything that additionally, apart from people coming and following your work, post sabbatical, do you have clarity? What can people expect from you? Or is it not ready yet?
You mean what's next? What's next?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
One piece that's clear is that I, after publishing 2 books in the traditional publishing world, I'm ready to create my own press. It's going to be called the Financial Therapy Press. And we're working on the first book called The Money Emotions Handbook. We're almost done with it. The second one will be about how to have money dates with yourself. And the third one will be all about couples money conversations. How do you begin them and not fight and scream and swear? But that, that happens too. And then you learn how to do them differently. So the Financial Therapy Press is what's coming, so that I can self-publish and oversee that and do that from my home and online. And I'm still going to be on a pause from teaching, and maybe private sessions we'll see. But that's the one thing that's clear that's coming is I'm ready to create the Financial Therapy Press and to self-publish my own content and books, and maybe other people's. We'll see that. So that's as we're sending our son off into the world in his next phase and all of that. That's one thing.
Thank you so much for being there, for being so having so much to give and offer to the community. And so for everyone, please follow baritessler.com. And thank you for being in the show. And
thank you so much for having me. I feel like we could have talked about many, many other things. So to be continued in any way.
Yes,
Thank
yes,
you.
I would love to have you back when all of that begins to flourish, and I will definitely reach out again.
Sounds good.
Beautiful. So this is Mindfulness in Action, and my name is Dalida Turkovic, and see you next time.